Hey guys, Capt here, preacher at large, teaching the word and inspiring 3 minutes at a time. Hey, I try not to get too much about what's going on in the world into these and try to keep this focused on Jesus, but let me just bring a little history in here. You know, I've studied history, and one thing in common with all nations that took over other nations was the destruction of basically everything from the conquered nation. They destroyed temples and holy places and statues, and they basically obliterated that culture and replaced it with their own culture. So throughout Bible history and secular history, we see this with the Romans, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Persians, the Vikings. We even see it with Hitler, right? And so on. They have to do away with everything else and replace it with this new thing. So when I see that all of our nation's symbols are being destroyed or under attack, what else can I think except that we're being invaded? That's the only conclusion I can draw. And ironically, we're going to repeat history if we don't remember our history. I get it, all of our history is not good, but it's still history. Right, here's another thing that I learned that people seem to forget about. Every nation that conquered the other nations took slaves. So basically, if you go through history, you'll find out that basically every race, every culture was enslaved at some point at some time. I get it, slavery was bad. But here's the thing we need to really remember, right? It was white people that stopped slavery. I get it, they're the ones that enslaved, but it was also black people that enslaved. It was black slave traders, right? But we seem to forget that it was President Lincoln, a white president, that ended slavery. So let's focus on that, America. That America, while it had slavery, it took the initiative to end slavery. But here's an interesting fact. Slavery is not completely ended. Today, we see it in Africa, we see it in China, we see it in some Arab nations. It is still alive and vibrant today. So when people say it's been done over 200 years ago, slavery ended, it didn't. Yeah, in America, to an extent, we still have it in America today too. It's called the sex slave trade industry. It's funny that people want to complain about and protest and scream and yell about something that happened 200 years ago while we still have women in sex trade right now. So why aren't we hearing protests against that slavery? It sickens my heart. Puts a burden on my heart. Right? That we focus on something that happened 200 years ago, yet there's young women being enslaved right now. And you don't want to say anything about it, but you want to scream about what happened 200 years ago. But here's what I want to focus on right now, who Jesus is. I want to remind us, because I got to remind myself sometimes when I see all this junk happening in the world, who Jesus is. And it's in Colossians chapter 1, verses 13 through 20. He has rescued us from the power, Jesus has rescued us from the power of darkness and transferred us into the kingdom of his beloved Son, in whom we have redemption for forgiveness of sins. He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For in him all things in heaven and earth were created, things visible, things invisible, whether thrones or dominions, rulers or powers, all things have been created through him and for him. He himself is before all things and in all things, and holds all things together. He is the head of the body of the church. He is the beginning of the firstborn of the dead, so that we might come to have first place in everything. For in him we have the fullness of God, and was pleased to dwell. And through him God was pleased to reconcile himself all things, whether on earth or in heaven, by making peace through the blood of his cross. In the midst of all this stuff that is going on, let's just remember who Jesus is. And let's focus on the things that really matter. Now, Get your face in the Bible.